Hey lore lovers, welcome to the first special on the channel, and welcome to my pirate hangout I call the Crow's Nest.
I don't know why. It's not really high up off the ground like a crow's nest should be.
Same way why Greenland and Iceland are named the same way, I guess. Anyway, I have a special tale to tell you today. I mentioned in an earlier video how I have a novel coming out soon.
Our novel. It's our novel.
Sorry, yes, our novel.
It's really my accomplishment. I wrote it.
Well, I finished writing it.
Well, I got these gray hairs from trying to write it.
Oh no, you got gray hair? Okay, we have a novel coming out. And you've heard it here first. It's coming out March 27th, 2021. So mark your calendars. And I am so excited to be sharing it with you all. I plan to share a chapter a season to help build up hype and help celebrate the launch of my novel.
Our novel.
There will be giveaways and surprises, but I'll talk about those when the release date gets closer. I really hope you enjoy this story. I've had stories published before. I've seen my name in newspapers and online articles, but this novel is my baby. We have been working on it for 13 years, imagining it for at least 20. If you remember my video of the 2 myths and a lie, the myth about Hodemus and Arachno, the god of death, is for this fantasy novel.
Just read it already.
Sorry, I'm just a little nervous.
Don't be. We did good.
I'd like to think so. Well, lore lovers, without further ado, I present to you the first public reading of Reign of Shadows by T.S. Kolanga. Chapter 1. The Vigil. Rafik stared up at the black wall. The few stars shined through like faraway candlelight. It wasn't just because of how few stars pierced the ebon dome, but because of his father that he recognized his favorite constellation, Queller the warrior. Pointing up into the sky, he traced out the warrior, ending on the tip of the spear, which was the North Star. Because of the dome, it was easier to navigate at night than during the day, another thing his father taught him. 7 years, he sighed, scratching patterns into the worn, ruined stone tower he sat on. He imagined a ship coming into view on the horizon, navigating through the dangerous waters leading to Dats. Even in this darkness, he could recognize it. The size of the ship, the sails and tattered flag. It was his father's ship, one he was certain he'd never see again. Some things never change, an older voice laughed from behind him. What? Rafik asked, turning. Oh, hi, Hector. I remember seeing you up here every day whenever your father was out sailing, Hector said, brushing his gray hair out of his face from the wind. The other children playing, your mother always with your baby sister, but you sat up here, determined to bring him back by sheer will alone. Rafik smiled. Those were the good days, when his family was still complete. Do you know what today is? The old man nodded. I do indeed. Your father was a good man, Rafik. Shame he is gone. We could really use him right now. Fortunately, your Uncle Gorik is still there for you. For us. Rafik didn't say a word. The sea breeze was a welcome change to the fires at the city gates. It had been nearly a month since their ruined city went under siege. Do you think he'll make it back in time? Gorik? Oh, I'm sure of it. The only time he was late was on the trip we lost your father, and I don't think that will happen again, but that's a different story. What are they waiting for? Rafik asked, turning his attention to the glowing light of the fires. They have enough soldiers to overpower us. Anza and I helped count them this morning. I'm not sure, but thankful they have waited, Hector said, scratching his chin. The king knows we aren't starving. He gestured to the tall blue ocean along the banks where fishermen waiting for their catch. What do you think will happen? Hector sighed. He looked over the city in the pale moonlight. It was mostly ruined, long ago, before the Black Wall, It was a major city with tens of thousands of citizens, now only 100. Do you know the legend of that constellation? Queller? Rafik said. Yeah, Dad would always tell me the story whenever he saw me looking up at it. He was a farmer, Hector began, ignoring the fact Rafik had heard the story before. Nothing great. Had a humble life. A good life. But then a man named Grax arrived and began demanding his food. Queller offered a generous portion, but Grax refused, wanting it all. When Queller refused to give him more, Grax burned the farm and his family as punishment. Grax grew in power, forgetting Queller, but Queller didn't forget him and helped raise the army to stop him. It was Queller who defeated Grax. The gods recognized Queller and gave him a place among the stars. Dad's version was a little different, Rafik smiled. Your father was a better storyteller than me. It's probably why he became a sailor, to tell tall tales, Hector said. He did like telling stories, Rafik nodded, a smile slowly growing. Us Dacians are much like Queller, Hector replied. We will do what's right. King Van Arzer wants to take all of the children and force them into his army. We don't agree with that, so we will do all we can to stop him. Even if we die trying, Rafik smirked. We are either going to be Queller or the destruction that inspires the warrior, but we aren't going to sit by and let the king get away with it. I fear I am veering off course, Rafik. I didn't come up here to talk to you about the fate of Dats or constellation stories. I came to collect you. What for? You'll see. Come on, Hector said, tugging at Rafik and beginning to climb down the ladder. Rafik got to his feet, brushing himself off. He sighed, looking at his home. Dats didn't look like much. In fact, to most it probably looked like a long-forgotten city, slowly crumbling to dust. To Rafik and everyone else here, this was home. He followed Hector, entering the streets below. The streets of Dats twisted and turned in all different directions. Rafik couldn't imagine finding his way through the city if the buildings weren't in ruins. Every street now had different shapes of destroyed buildings. The homes that still had people living in them were more intact and had blankets in the windows, but most of those were near the docks. The tower he came from was closer to the city gates. He followed Hector, weaving his way through the streets. Then he saw it, just up ahead, candlelight, and the soft rhythmic noise of a melody on the wind. What's going on? Rafik asked, anxious to see more. Hector didn't answer. He continued moving forward, walking at a brisk pace for an elderly man. Rafik recognized where they were going, but didn't understand why. They arrived at the city center, with a few more than a dozen people huddled around a large pond. They called it the Pond of Memories, and much like the rest of Dats, was the ruins of an ancient temple. The group each held a candle and sang in just above a whisper. Rafik noticed the dark hair of his sister standing next to their mother. What's this? He asked. Their mother smiled, opening her arms and hugging Rafik. Before she could respond, Hector began to speak. Thank you for coming out. I know we haven't done this in a long time, but tonight we honor the memory of a great man, Drain, lost at sea but not forgotten. Rafik's mother, Tamra, stepped forward holding a small paper boat, a candle for a mast. She placed it into the pond and pushed the tiny vessel into the water. It drifted to the center of the pond as the candle burned. The small light from the candle burst with light as it touched the paper boat. All the while, Rafik held Anza's hand, remembering their father. The small group watched the boat burn, taking turns sharing their memories of Drain. Rafik wasn't paying attention. He was remembering his own time with his father, teaching them to read, to sail, playing pirates and soldiers in and around the ruins, watching his father hug their mother, telling her how much he loved her. He remembered his jovial smile and booming laughter. He wiped away tears trickling down his face several times. Hector was just finishing up a memory he had of Gorik and his father testing the waters around Dats. He missed the most of it, but joined when a few people laughed and smiled. Thank you, Tamara said, the last of the boat sinking into the pond. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Rafik and his family at the pond. No, don't do that, sweetie. Anza had picked up a pebble and tossed it into the pond. You don't want to do that, Hector said, kneeling to face her. Why not? Since the temple collapsed, this pond has been a memorial to all that was lost. Throwing a rock in will disturb the dead, Hector explained. The dead can't come back to life, Rafik argued. Throw another pebble in there and find out, Hector challenged. If I do, maybe they'll bring back Dad, Rafik said, kicking loose dirt into the pond. Others say there's a door down there, to the land of the immortals, Tamara said, one of the 2 cursed tribes of men. Now who is making things up? Hector laughed. Either way, don't throw rocks into the pond. It's a story Drain would tell, Tamara said. The world of the immortals is below us. He and Gorik talked about it all the time. The only thing below Dats is dirt, Hector said. Tamara sighed. Let's get you 2 to bed. Rafik yawned, only now realizing he was tired. The 3 started home, leaving Hector at the pond. This wasn't much, Hector said, catching up to the 3 of them. He smiled, winking at Anza. But I hope this has helped. It has, thank you, Tamara said, and I'm glad she didn't decide to come ruin everything. I threatened Selena if she did, Hector said. She can be the rain any other day, but not on special moments like this. His hand lingered on Tamara's shoulder. Rafik noticed the look he gave his mother and furrowed his brow. Blood almost boiling. Why did we have a vigil when we haven't since his first anniversary? There is no excuse for why we haven't, Hector said, but we'll have one from now on. Every year, Drain, your father, won't be forgotten. No, he won't. Right, Mom? Rafik asked, getting her attention. She had a smile he hadn't seen in years on her face. No, he won't, Tamara nodded. Now take your sister home. Hector and I need to talk. Rafik didn't say another word, turning to leave. For the last 7 years, his mother hadn't always been there for them, cooped up in her bed, not wanting to leave. Often it was he who took care of Anza. She had been more active recently, yet anger still festered within him when he would see the way she gawked at Hector. Though he was only 14, he had a feeling tonight wasn't about his father. Do you think Gorik will be back tomorrow? Anza asked once they got home. Their home, Rafik nicknamed the Nest, wasn't much. It was one of the buildings without ever having an upper level. There was a cellar, but for the last few years was flooded, but all around were cushions and blankets. He remembered gathering the pillows and blankets, making small forts for his sister to play in. There was just one bedroom, and that was their parents'. Rafik and Anza slept near the fire, falling asleep to the crackling of flames. I hope so, Rafik said. I'm not sure when the Kylix will attack us, but the sooner he gets back, the better. Anza nodded, taking a sip of milk from a cup on the table. She yawned and gathered up some blankets and pulled them up near the fire. Autumn had crept in seemingly overnight. The days were crisp, but the nights were near freezing. I miss him. Rafik gathered some blankets of his own and cuddled next to Anza. I do too. Hey, Rafik, Anza asked after several minutes of silence. Yes? Do you think Hector will be our new dad? Rafik bit his lip, clenching his fist. Good night, Anza. I like Hector. He's not our father, Rafik snapped. He rolled over, his back to Anza. Good night, Anza. Rafik woke with a start, noticing Anza was already gone. He scrambled to his feet, looking around the nest. Anza's giggle echoed from the back bedroom, his mother's voice muffled. Without making a noise, he slipped out the window as the door always creaked. He clenched his fists, thinking of last night. What should have been a good night in memory was tainted. Before he knew it, he was back at the tower, watching the ocean. Where are you, Gorik? He asked. He watched the waves crash to the shore and fishermen gathering their catches. The salty breeze hit Rafik, and for a moment he imagined himself on the sea with Gorik and his father. An explosive bang jolted Rafik from his daydreams. Another noise came echoing throughout the city. Rafik turned, looking at the city gate. The doors budged with another bang. It was finally happening. His face drained with color. He swiveled around, unsure of what to do. He heard the shouts and screams from others below. The monotony of life under siege had ended. A handful of Dacians climbed the city gates, raining arrows down on the attackers. Moments later, they fell backwards off the wall, arrows piercing them. He heard Hector shout to get into position, but still, Rafik froze. He could only watch with morbid fascination as the city gate bulged again. This time he heard cracks in the doors. Another bang. And another. Then the door burst open. A massive head of a dragon burst through the hole, fires roiling inside its mouth. It took a moment to realize the dragon was just a metal statue as it fell, and the Kylik soldiers poured into the ruined city. He didn't think anything would be more frightening than the maw of a dragon breaking into the city. Rafik was wrong. The Kylik soldiers dressed like the dead, all metal suits of armor with bones designed into it, making it look as if the dead had risen. Even their helmets looked like skulls. His skin crawled as he watched them flood the city, hacking at even the defenseless. It wasn't long until the screams of triumph became louder than the screams of the fearful. Rafik hurried to his feet, watching the tidal wave of death come towards him faster than he thought possible. He had to get Anza. They had to escape. Well, lore lovers, what do you think? Do you want to hear more, or should I stick with telling other people's stories? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that bell notification icon to be alerted when the next video becomes available. Also, if you would like to stay up to date on what's happening with my novel, go ahead and click the link below to my Facebook author page. More videos about my book will be coming soon, so stay tuned. And until next time, lore lovers, keep your imagination flourishing.